Welcome to the Eco Inquiry Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Barron, and today we are going to talk all about fish. So it helps if you go to the Eco Inquiry website fish page. That is ecoinquiry.ca/the-fish-game/. When you get there, you're going to see the Eco Game card for the fish game. It has 12 different kinds of freshwater fish. And then it has limiting factors of pollution and overfishing. The freshwater fish are obviously found in freshwater lakes, and all of these fish are found in the freshwater lake that is closest to my home, Lake Simcoe. You'll see that there are game signs that you simply cut out, run through the photocopier, cut out, put on cardstock, and then hopefully you can find spots in your schoolyard, whether it is urban or rural, to tape up the game cards. I use duct tape. That's easiest I found. And then the students simply have to go on a scavenger hunt and match up the fish. They have to find the fish game signs and match them up to their game card. For a free download of all 15 eco games, you can go to Teachers Pay Teachers, and the link is on the fish game page on the Eco Inquiry website. Now, then what the students have to do is write down dots and dashes. This is, of course, the oldest electronic communication system in the world, Morse code. When they put the matching game sign Morse code symbol on the game card, they will have 12 different symbols. What they do then is they decode them to find the secret environmental message. Now, for those of your students who are at home, because if any of you are like me, and since the pandemic, you've been pivoting to online, or you have some students in a hybrid learning situation where they're learning from home, the students at home online can still participate. On the Eco Inquiry Fish Game webpage, you can see that the game card is pre-populated with the codes, and the students can actually decode them and then listen on the Morse code translator. So let's listen for a moment to what that sounds like. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it through the podcast. And I'm not going to tell you what the secret environmental message is. The students are going to have to decode it and figure it out for themselves. Now let's go on for a moment about the limiting factors of fish in freshwater lakes. The first one is, unfortunately, pollution. Like all other ecosystems, fish are connected to everything else in the lake, all other living things. And one of the biggest problems for freshwater lakes in North America is excess nutrients that goes into the lake, such as phosphorus and nitrogen. It can come in from things like farmers' fields or animal waste, that sort of thing. And those nutrients that get into the lake can cause a whole lot of plant growth. It can even cause things like algae blooms. And of course, there are infamous ones on lakes like Lake Erie in the 1970s. So what can happen then is that these organisms can block the sunlight from reaching the lower levels of the lake, and the algae will die, and their decomposition removes oxygen from the water. Now, when the dissolved oxygen, which of course the fish need, gets low enough, then the fish can actually die. In my lake, Lake Simcoe, there is an okay amount of dissolved oxygen, but eutrophication is one of the largest problems because of excess nutrients such as phosphorus in the lake. And animals such as fish need a large amount of oxygen to reproduce and for their young. And so that is a very difficult problem for the fish in many freshwater lakes. The solution is to prevent the nutrients from getting into the rivers and lake system in the first place. Another problem, of course, is overfishing. And when we think of fishing, and we look at outdoor fishing magazines and ice fishing magazines, there almost exclusively are white men on the cover holding up the fish as though it is a trophy. So this can kind of, don't get me wrong, I love fishing. I'm going to talk about fishing a lot, But this sort of ethic of, fishing the largest fish and many fish, that's not necessarily the message that we want to send. And it's also not the message of fishing is just for the white male. So we want to protect our lakes and oceans from overfishing, which has happened, unfortunately, in the last couple of 100 years. We will talk about how to protect fish and lakes from overfishing momentarily. Now, when the students are playing the game, the eco game in the schoolyard, they can lose points by getting caught when it turns into a tag game by students who are playing the variables pollution and overfishing. And again, for complete instructions on how to play the fish game, eco game in your schoolyard, which is a lot of fun for students, please go on to the free download on Teachers Pay Teachers, and the link is on the website. Okay, so moving on, let's say you've played the game, the kids have decoded the secret environmental message, and they're ready to go a little bit deeper, pun intended, into some eco inquiry about fish. What they can do then on the Eco Inquiry website is go on to the virtual choice board. And there is an image of a lake with many different kinds of freshwater fish, bass, perch, pike. And when they click on those images, they can learn more about fish conservation and habitat protection. Now, what you need to do, though, is make a copy. You can't edit the one on the website, and you simply have to make a copy in your Google Slides. It will make your own, and then you can change the Bitmoji, you can change the links to the images, all those things that we're getting used to with Google Slides and virtual classrooms. Now, one of the things that we can do to support our students in interacting and connecting with fish, and of course, we can't do this as teachers, we can't take them fishing as teachers, but as parents and as adults supporting students in connecting with fish, most conservation authorities, natural resource departments in provinces and states have a Ministry of Natural Resources, which is connected to fishing. I live in Ontario, and Ontario has the Learn to Fish program at Ontario Parks, tips on fishing with kids, family events, and things like Tackle Share. Until I researched this podcast, I actually didn't realize there was a thing called Tackle Share, where you can go to libraries in Ontario, other public spaces where you can sign out tackle for fishing. Of course, safety first. So if you're heading out in a boat or you're near water, children and most adults should wear life jackets, of course. By I meant most adults, I mean standing on the shoreline. You often don't see adults wearing life jackets, but everybody should wear life jackets in a boat as per boating regulations. So take a look at your provincial or state Ministry of Natural Resources for fishing programs for kids. There are also wonderful resources to support students in understanding conservation. And fishing and learning about fish is one of the best ways to understand a conservation ethic. Like I said before, we have overfished lakes and oceans, and it's very, very important to learn the importance or to learn about conservation. So most, again, provinces and states have fishing regulation summaries about fishing seasons for each fish, how many you can catch in that fishing season, etc. And there are often activity books to go along with that for children to get them interested in fishing and learning more about fish. Now, notoriously, fishing, like I have said, has been a space for the white male to go out fishing with his buddies. My grandfather taught me how to fish. My dad loved fishing, and I learned to love fishing, as did most of the women in my family as well. I love to fish, not necessarily to catch the fish, which is in and of itself exciting, but I love to spend as much time as possible outside. I love the peacefulness of fishing. And Demisha Dennis, who is the founder of Brown Girl Outdoor World, has been working tirelessly to make fishing inclusive, equitable, and accessible. This reference comes from an article by Nairai Tawengwa in Canadian Geographic called Color the Trails, Taking Up Space with Demisha Dennis. And I most recently spoke with Sylvia Denton Carroll, who is the coordinator of TDSB Outdoor Education Centers, who went on a fishing day with Demisha. And I talked to her on the Eco Inquiry podcast. You can listen to that on season 1 of the Eco Inquiry podcast. And Sylvia talked to us not only about the excitement of catching fish, but also that it gave her an opportunity to relate to one of her students who, when she was teaching virtually last year during the pandemic, one of her grade 2 students who was regularly going out fishing with his family. Now, that happens with my students too. They consistently go out fishing with their families on Lake Simcoe. And I'm just going to stop a video for a moment. One of the things that I love to do, I did love to fish as a child. I don't do it as much anymore, but I live on a river and I love to observe fish. So there are 2 videos on the Eco Inquiry playlist on YouTube where you can use the videos to help your students observe fish behavior and sparks for Eco Inquiry. The first video is on a bass that I was passing over with my paddleboard, and I noticed that it was black. Upon doing some research, I realized that this was either a mother or a father bass that was protecting its eggs, and I could observe it going into the rock shadows. And then when there was something that was threatening it, and I didn't stay long, I just took a really quick video and observed it and left because I knew I was stressing the fish out. The fish would then approach whatever it was in, a fairly assertive way to make sure that that whatever was approaching was doing no harm to the eggs and later on the fry. In the other video that I have to spark Eco Inquiry, it's taken from my kayak. I live on a river where I spend a lot of time in the spring, summer, and fall observing minnows and pickerel and bass jumping. And this is a particular video about a bass jumping. And the question is, why is the bass doing that? Now, there are a lot of ways to get children into fishing other than simply fishing, or sorry, get them into fish other than fishing. Once children connect, they always want, they care, and they want to do something to promote eco action. One of the best programs for eco action in Canada, and I believe this is in the United States too, is the Yellowfish Road program. So children can get stencils from conservation authorities or from municipalities where they paint this over the stencil yellow, and they put it beside a drain on the road. Of course, they have to do this carefully and with adult supervision. And it says rainwater only. This informs people to keep drains open and to ensure that people aren't doing things like putting oil down drains when they change the oil in their cars, etc. So it's a wonderful program which is now run through Trout Unlimited Canada. And you can find out more about that program at www.yellowfishroad.org. On the Eco Inquiry website, there are also many book suggestions. Of course, these are linked to one of my favorite activities in the community and my students' favorite activities with their families in the wintertime, ice fishing. Like I said, I live on Lake Simcoe, and Lake Simcoe is a huge ice fishing lake. People come from far and wide to ice fish on Lake Simcoe. Ice fishing is a very traditional way of life for Indigenous people and Inuit in Canada. And one of my favorite books is A Promise is a Promise by Robert Munch, illustrated by Michael Kusagak. And it talks about how important it is for children not to go out on the ice alone. So I spend a lot of time with my students talking about ice safety and comparing their ice fishing experiences with experiences of the Inuit ice fishing, and they love all of these stories. We then go on to do some fishing activities like art, where the students create collages and dioramas of ice fishing. And if you want more activities for children with fish, you could go to the Canadian Wildlife Federation and look up Make a Splash, fish-focused activities for children. There's all sorts of wonderful activities there. Another community science project that kids can do with educators is something called Ice Watch. So I'm within a couple minutes walking distance from Lake Simcoe. And again, we do a lot of ice safety, particularly around the end of February and beginning of March. Ice fish huts have to be off in our community by March 15th. And so the students will actually go back and educate their parents about that. So Ice Watch is a wonderful community science program through Nature Watch. And what you can do is see when you can record in the program when the lake that you live closest to freezes over and when it melts. This is a wonderful program across Canada for scientists together to gather real-time data. And of course, that is connected to climate change. I love the cold. I love ice. And I think it is extremely important that we have the right to be cold. We have the right to have ice and have our economies that are dependent on things such as ice fishing and people's livelihoods connected to fish. And of course, the most important thing is for the life cycles of the fish themselves. So one of the things that we can do as well, and that students can do, is write to their municipal councillors and to provincial members of parliament who are in charge of fish, natural resources, waterways, and talk about the effects of salt. Salt contamination from putting salt on our roads is quite frightening. Claire Malcolmson has written about this very recently on February 14th, 2022 in the Toronto Star. And she's written, salt contamination of Lake Simcoe is a frightening warning about highway expansion. Lake Simcoe is on a trajectory to reach toxic levels of salt in 37 years if current patterns continue. So we don't want to salinate our freshwater lakes. The eco-inquiry video that I've attached there is called Why is the Ice Moving Like This? And you can see it on the eco-inquiry playlist. And it is a fascinating video of ice coming off the lake and a way to start those sparks and conversations for deeper inquiry about ice, the importance of ice, and issues like salt and nutrient pollution and eutrophication. So I hope you find those eco-inquiry videos helpful. Just going to stop that. So thank you so much for listening to the Eco Inquiry podcast. I hope that this has given you the opportunity to think about games that you can play in the schoolyard, some virtual learning you can do with your students, ways to spark deeper eco inquiry on topics related to aquatic habitats and fish habitats, such as eutrophication, fish conservation. And I really appreciate you listening. For more information, go to the ecoinquiry.ca website and click on the fish page. Thank you.